Hi everyone, how you going? Hope you're having a fantastic day everywhere around the world. I was just reading something before and it just seems really interesting. I'm going to share this. A penal treadmill. Alright, this is it here. So a penal treadmill was a treadmill with steps set into two cast iron wheels. These drove a shaft that we could use to mill corn and pump water or connect to a large fan for resistance. Or perhaps make electricity. Penal treadmills were used in prisons in the early Victorian Britain as a method of exerting hard labour, a form of punishment prescribed to in the prisoner's sentence. The prison treadmill was introduced in 1818 by a British engineer, Sir William Cubitt, 1785 to 1861, as a means of usefully occupying convicts in the prisons at Bury Street, Edmonds and Brixton. There had been a simple two-man treadmills in prisons before, which were used for raising water and grain preparation. These were on a large scale and for a different purpose. Cubitt observed prisoners lying around in idleness and opinion that it was better for reforming offenders by teaching them habits of industry. It was intended to be pointless and punish. Resistance to the motion was provided by straps and weights. Later, when prison philosophy had changed, it became more acceptable to use the energy to power pumps and corn mills. 44 prisons in England adopted this form of hard labour to grind grain. Others remained grinding the wind. By the Prison Act in 1865, every male prisoner over 16 sentenced to hard labour had to spend at least 3 months of his sentence in labour order. This consisted primarily of the treadmill, or as an alternative, the crank machine. This consisted of a small wheel like the wheel of a paddle steamer, and the handle, turned by the prisoner, made it revolve in a box partially filled with gravel. In 1895, there were 39 treadmills and 29 cranks in use in English prisons, and these had diminished to 13 and 5 respectively in 1901. The use of treadmills was abolished in Britain by 1902 by the Prisons Act. Well, see, by 1902 they had the power all through the place. So I was wondering if these were used to, this is the fan. I was wondering if they were used to, it's one of the crank ones. America adopted the treadmill in 1822, installing one in Bellevue Hospital in New York City, and a second was erected in 1823 for the cost of $3,000 at Old Newgate Prison in East Garnaby, CT. A total of 4 were only built, 3 of which were quickly abandoned. And this prison was an old mine, Old Newgate Prison. It's a copper mine. Prison treadwheel was a long wooden cylinder with metal framing, originally about 6 feet, 1.8 metre in diameter. On the exterior of the cylinder were wooden steps about 7.5 inches, 19 centimetres apart. As the prisoner put his weight on the step, he depressed the wheel and he was forced to step onto the step above. It was an everlasting staircase. There would be 18 to 25 positions on the wheel, each separated by a wooden partitioner, so each prisoner had no contact with the adjacent prisoner and only saw the wall in front. They walked in silence for 6 hours a day, taking 15 minutes on the wheel, followed by a 5-minute break. In popular culture, on their 1977 album, Stormforce 10, folk rock band Stylene Span included an English folk song called the Treadmill Song, describing a prisoner's lot at hard labour, including the treadmill. In Charles Dickens' novel, A Christmas Carol, Ebenezer Scrooge references the treadmill, which he describes as useful. And in his novel Bleak House, the lawyer Mr. Trollinghorn threatens Horton House with imprisonment with treadmills for women. In the 1997 film Wild, shows Oscar Wilde put to the treadmill as part of his hard labour and punishment. Were they generating power is what I want to know. Were they generating power? That's what I question. It had one part where it had people could come and watch them. So I just question an interior view of a Jamaican house of correction. They could have done the grain, and after the grain was done, they could have hooked it up to a battery, because the other one, um, the fan, the treadmill fan, the treadmill turned the fan. Here's another article. Prison treadmills before they were invented in England. 44 prisons in England adopted it as a form of hard labour, also grind grain or pump water. However, as it turns out, in at least one jail, prisoners were only grinding the wind. They were walking on a treadmill that was connected to a giant fan built on the courtyard. By this apparatus, the resistance necessary for rendering the treadmill hard labour was obtained. The system is explained in The Criminal Prisons of London and Scenes of Prison Life, 1862, written by, starting on page 299. They describe the method of hard labour. Crank machine was a penal labour device used in England in the 19th century. It consists of a hand-turned crank which forced 4 large cups or ladles through the sands inside the drum, doing nothing useful. The prisoner would typically be forced to do 6,000 to 14,400 revolutions over the period of 6 hours a day, or 1.5 to 3.6 seconds per revolution. Prison warden could make the task harder by tightening and adjusting screw. 1895 there were 29 crank machines in use, but by 1901 there were only 5. A cell with a prisoner at crank labour in the Surrey House of Correction. Crank model from the Oxford Prison Castle Museum. They have a dyno attached to it, is what I'm asking. So wherever you are in the world, thanks for watching. You have a great day. Much love. Bye now.